Welcome to the Sean Trey Show. I have a really awesome guest with me today. Now, I want to say one thing before I introduce you. I was joking before I got started. So, living in Vietnam, there is the most weird but awesome trade in secondhand shirts, and it's absolutely really random. Like you go into the U.S., you go to a thrift store, right? And say I'm in Tampa Bay, and I go to a thrift store in Tampa Bay. Well, there's going to be a ton of like Buccaneers, stuff. You're going to have Tampa Bay stuff, like local pubs, local kind of stuff. It would be kind of trickling into that. And each place, and that's one of the things I love to do. I love going to thrift stores all over the U.S. whenever I can, because see, like, what are some of the cool T-shirts that you can score there. Yeah. In Vietnam, there's this whole trade in secondhand clothes from the U.S. And so it's this really interesting thing. But what's really random is, like, I'll see these kids that are these secondhand retailers, and they just start posting stuff. And I'll crack up, and I'll tell my wife, and my wife's like, "Why do you always look at those?" I'm like, "There's some real gems on there." And what's really interesting to me is watching where the shipment came from. Because to other people, to them, it's just more random. But to me, I was like, okay, everything in here is like Baltimore stuff. It's the Ravens. And so this must be like a shipment from Baltimore, and you see it, and it's like, okay, this is all like Seattle stuff, so, pubs from up there. And so it's just really interesting to me. It's so random. Like, we're in such an interconnected world that you don't even know it all the time, And
Yeah.
It's really awesome. But
that's great.
Let's dive into who are you and what do you do, brother?
Yeah, my name's Chris. I grew up in Virginia, and how do I put it? I got bored, and so I wound up joining the Army.
Right. That's awesome.
I joined the Army when I was 28. Just wasn't really satisfied with kind of the job I was working. Full disclosure, it was an awesome job. Looking back, it was. So I was working at a fancy hotel in Virginia, and I was helping people get their dinner reservations straight. And I would roast marshmallows for little kids on the weekends and teach people how to play frisbee golf. It was great.
That's kind of rad. But I can see how you don't feel fulfilled like it.
It was a great job, like super cush, and just got to hang out with like some really cool people. But I got to the point where I wasn't like super satisfied with like the direction my life was headed. So I wound up enlisting in the Army, and I wanted to go Special Forces, and I had a knee surgery when I was a little kid, which prevented me from getting that Special Forces contract when I first enlisted. So I just went in as an infantryman, and while I was at basic training, some SF recruiters approached me and several other guys and said, "Hey, do you guys want to try out?" And I said, "Yes." And from there, I was stoked. From there, it was finished basic training, went to airborne school, and then went to selection. Got through selection, and then it was several years of the qualification course, which is just learning how to become a Green Beret. And then I graduated the Q course, got to the teams in 2016 and had a great time, got to travel all over the world. Went to one of my first trips with my team was to Serbia and then to Denmark. We did some time in Estonia. And then in 2019, I moved back to the States. I was over in Germany for a while. Moved back to the States in 2019, did a trip to Afghanistan last year, and then got out of the Army April of this year. And primarily because I as much as I enjoyed my time there and I got to work with some of the best people in the world, I wanted to challenge myself in a different kind of way.
Interesting.
So I got out in April and started a performance coaching business, and that's what I've been putting all of my eggs into lately. And that's been quite the adventure. It's definitely way different than what the Army was, but it's just as challenging. And so it's been a lot of fun so far.
So what is it? All right, there's a lot to unpack there. I'm going to dive into multiple different pathways and channels and such. But First of all, what does a performance coach do? What do you do in this role?
Yeah. So my philosophy is, in order to improve a society or improve a generation, the best way to do that is with one person at a time. And so when people decide to work with me, we sit down and I kind of help them figure out where they want to be in 5 years. And I start with, and I'm pretty firm on this, I start with this question: who do you want to become? And that who part is very important, because from that is that's how you develop this value system from which you can extrapolate all of your goals. So what kind of man do I want to be in 5 years? Once I answer that, then the goals that I attach to it are very personal to me and align with my value system. And so that's what I help people do. I help them figure out who they want to become, and then we establish these really big 5-year goals based on that identity and that value system. And then from my Army experience, we got really good at backwards planning. And so if I want to be here in 5 years, what do I got to do this year, and what do I got to do this month? What do I got to do this week, and then today? Like, what do I have to do today to make sure I'm on track to hit those 5-year goals? And that's what I help people do now. And it's been quite the adventure. And I've got to work with some really awesome people from all different kind of walks of life. And it's been a lot of fun so far.
You just touched on something that I've never really thought about, but that's really interesting. Like, backwards planning. I want to talk about that a little bit, because I do know that one of the challenges that I've had, I'm a black belt in judo, and one of the things that in that journey, I didn't sit there and go, here's all the stuff I have to do to get there. It was literally like my teacher did, though. My teacher did. He kind of had the whole curriculum laid out, and then he guided us to that. One of the things that what I did was just I focused on one throw at a time. But, you had to have the time there, you had to put in the training. But the real vision was in my teacher's curriculum, where he did have a 5-year plan in place for us. He did have it mapped out. And I wasn't aware of that. But the wisdom in that was really powerful. And for me, I just had to show up and go through it. And it was really, it wasn't easy to accomplish it. It was thrown on my ass thousands of times, and it was not fun, getting up off of, especially the days that you were training, and where it's freezing outside, and those judo mats become bricks, and you're just boom, slamming on it, and you're just oh, dear God, why am I doing this? Why have I decided to do this? But, you finish up training, you feel great, and the thing is you're in it, and you can't see that you're making this progress. You are not aware that you're making the progress. But yet, if you have that vision, and once I moved on into other areas of my life, and I didn't have that overarching focus, it's I felt in my 20s and part of my 30s, I was adrift, And I hear a lot of people say that, and even for me, one of the areas that I really break things down the most is cleaning my bedroom, because I'm really OCD. And my wife is an artist. She's a singer and a performer.
Right.
And let's just say it's a little bit messy sometimes. I love her to death, but things get messy. And when I have to go in and break down the clean, she'll look at me and she's like, "Our room's messy again." And I was like, "Yes, it is." "Yes, it is." And she's like, "Can you help me?" And I was like, "Yeah, all right." But I get overwhelmed if I have to look at this whole room. And this is something I teach my daughter. I'm like, right now, she's like, "Daddy, this room, how do we clean this room? Where do we start?" I'm like, "The table. Right here, we're going to get this table clean. Once this table is clean, we can move on to the bottom of the bed. Not the whole bed, just the bottom of the bed. Get the blankets folded, get things set up, and then from there we move." And I just... and I start sweeping around the room. I work clockwise. I'm very methodical about that. Because if I don't, it makes me crazy. And I lose focus and I get off track. And so it's really interesting because I'm before we started off, I'm talking about my career transition, and I'm starting into an MBA. I'm trying to kick off my own business in a big way, and a couple of them, and I feel overwhelmed at times. So this is really interesting, this idea of visualizing yourself out in 5 years and then planning back from that. Can you talk to me more about that? Did you learn that in Special Forces, and how do you train for that?
Good question, and I think it's a skill that people can learn kind of anywhere. It's ingrained in the Army, at least from my experience. My experience in the Army, they ingrained it in us from like an early point in our careers, because we refer to them as time hacks. You have to be here at this time, dressed in this uniform, and if you're late, there'll be consequences. And so from that, it's just like, all right, if I've got an hour and I know it takes me X number of minutes to do, get shaved and get dressed and stuff like that, I need to plan ahead to be able to make it on time. And if you're on time, then you're actually late. You always have to be 10 or 15 minutes early in the Army, or you'll get in trouble. But yeah, that backwards planning, it's now become second nature, and being on time or early to things, it's become second nature, and largely because of the discipline that was instilled in me while I was in the military. But I've found that it's applicable anywhere, and it's one of those skills that is just like vital. Like if you can just show up on time, you're like ahead of the game for a lot of folks, and at least where I am. But in regards to backwards planning and taking like that big vision and breaking it down, one of my first clients I worked with, he was kind of down on his luck and not doing great, and working with me was kind of, for him, kind of like his last option of like, I got to get my life together. And we started breaking down some of his 5-year goals, and I started talking to him about his financial plan. All right, where do you want to be financially in 5 years? He's like, I don't know, man, maybe I have $5,000 saved in the bank. I was like, no, man, that's not big enough. He's like, what do you mean? And I told him, I was like, why don't you plan for $20,000 in the bank in 5 years? And he's like, there's no way I could ever do that. And I showed him, I was like, just start hitting divide on the calculator. And so when you took that sum of money and start dividing it by 5 years, and then by 365 days in a year, it wound up being like something like $11 a day. And so I asked him, I was like, hey man, when you go to work every day, could you put $11 in the bank? And he said, yeah, I could totally do that. And so it's really, the backwards planning, I think, is really just a mindset shift, particularly if you've set really big goals, really big, scary goals for yourself. It's not impossible. It just needs to be broken down properly. And if you can focus, kind of like you mentioned, on the little task, the little step that I got to take today, it makes that journey much less overwhelming. And you can really make some progress if you just maintain consistency. So $11 a day is nothing, but $11 a day accrued over 5 years is $20,000. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's really that compound effect of effort that I try to help people imagine.
Yeah. There was something that when I train my daughter and I work with her, she's like very quick to pick a new task up.
Yeah.
Let's do this. Let's start this. And we were talking about piano. She's starting to learn the piano. And her teacher had to take a month off because she had some family issues and had to go back to her hometown. Mm-hmm. And luckily everything's okay. Excuse me. And so when the teacher came back, and while my daughter has been practicing again more regularly, and she said something, she's like, wow, she's like, I forgot a lot. And I was like, yeah, because you have to keep at it. And I was like, we tried, but we didn't do such a great job. And a teacher's job is to kind of pace you in that. And one of the things that was interesting was on Instagram, I saw this one one of the Instagram financial gurus, and there's a bunch of them, which I respect to them for doing what they do. But this girl was selling her, like, I think she was selling sheets that she had made on Canva or something, and it was selling them on her page or Etsy or something. And what they were was essentially not checklist, but like it was a bunch of squares, and each square it had $5, right? And it says, so you want to save up 10 grand this year. This is how much you have to set aside. And it wasn't like 10 grand.
Right.
It was like little increments of $100. And it's like you just start checking one off. You set aside $100, boom, pop it in. You set aside, and she had different degrees. She had $1,000 to save. She had $5,000. She had $10,000. So people could approach what their goal, what they felt could be a reasonable goal for themselves.
Yeah.
And what was awesome with that is, like, I love the idea of seeing things broken down, because again, it's kind of a reverse planning, that you have this larger vision, you want to get there, and I think that the element that would be missing from that would be time. What it was missing from her spreadsheet would be time. So maybe this paper is for 1 year, and then now I need to break down. Okay, so every 2 weeks I need to be setting aside this much. And that to me is just, I've never really given thought to that though. And one of my buddies was in Special Forces. He's a Navy SEAL. And he would always talk about, like, planning. He didn't do anything without, like, he'd go camping, and he'd plan the hell out of that camping trip, man.
Absolutely.
And it was just like, and I tried to pick up, and my daughter today was asking me something, and she's like, well, someone said that they're going to do this, Daddy. Do we trust that they're going to do it? I said, no, we don't. I don't trust anyone. You anticipate that it's going to go wrong. You anticipate that they didn't do it, and then we double check. We double check, and then we're happily surprised when it goes right, or that they did.
Right. You
know what I mean? But what I mean, and I'm not trying to instill in my child an absolute sense of distrust, but maybe a little bit. It's like you got. And my point being is you got to plan stuff. You got to really be on top of it. Because then when things you do hit roadblocks, or you do hit challenges, you don't freak out. You don't get overwhelmed, because I think this is one of the things that I've always loved from guys that have been in the military. And I think I got a degree of this from training in martial arts. There's this one thing that I notice with a lot of people. They go deer in the headlights.
Yeah.
I was talking to some people here in Vietnam, and they don't have deer like we have in the West, and I was like, and she's like, I don't believe that someone, and like one of my friends was like, I don't believe that someone could freeze up. How could a deer freeze up? And I was like, you don't understand it. The headlights come on, and they stop. And it's the weirdest phenomenon, and I think people are the same. I think that so many people will hit challenges, and they haven't prepared for that. They haven't mentally put themselves into a place where they're ready for that. And I think that, one of the strengths that I could see with backward planning is that maybe you plan for those setbacks. Maybe you plan for some of that stuff. How do you approach the challenges people face?
That's a great question. And yeah, I think that was ingrained in me too while I was in the military. Is you have your plan, and then you always have a backup plan. Now, when I'm working with people, I think the skill that I'm trying to actually instill in them is create a plan for your life. Otherwise, you're just going to react to life. And
I love that.
And if you have a plan, when stuff gets weird or stuff goes sideways, maybe it totally ruins your plan, but you've still made progress up until that point. And now you have the skills from which you can create a new plan if you need to. Or the crisis that happened, maybe it was a hiccup because you had a plan. And now it's like, all right, well, I've made progress up to here. That was super unfortunate that I experienced that. All right, take a breath. Now continue mission and keep going. But I think, unfortunately, a lot of people don't plan out their life. They have a lot of things that they hope happen, but they don't make preparations for, or they don't make plans to make it happen. And then they get disappointed when their life doesn't turn out the way they want it, and so for me, my whole kind of philosophy is, aim really big, figure out who you want to be, and then make it happen, because otherwise you are just reacting to life, and you will have a mediocre existence, and probably be disappointed. So,
well, see, and that's an interesting point, because like, say I'm gonna use myself for an example. Like, I would love to be as big of a host as like Joe Rogan, or maybe Steve. What's his name? I love that guy. He hosts Family Feud now. Steve Harvey. I love Steve Harvey.
Oh yeah.
His inspirational stuff is amazing, man. I never knew that the guy was so awesome. I thought he just did Miss World and
right.
and Family Feud. But then when I listened to his inspirational talks, it's amazing. But say I tell someone, all right, I want to be like Joe Rogan.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to be that big, be making that type of money, have that type of influence, have that type of sphere of reach. Because to me, like, it's not about the fame. I love the fact that both of those men have the ability to make waves, to create, that's one of the things that I really respect about Joe Rogan. I might not agree with everything that's said on his podcast, and probably a fair amount of it I'm going to question and say, that's not my cup of tea. Right. But the reality that they can move the conversation, that you can move the needle, that's power to me. That you can start a dialogue happening. But here's the thing. Like, when I sit there and look at, how can I accomplish that? I'm going to get to that. And this is something that I love. This is an example I use, right? I talk to someone, and let's say, what's your goal? Well, I want to make $500,000 a year. Okay, that's awesome. Like, right. I love that. What are you making now? $28,000. Okay, right. And I mean, there's no judgment on either of those places, right? But the thing is I'm like, well, let's see. How do you make it to 35?
Exactly.
Oh man, I can't do that. That's just I've been trying. It's so hard. Yeah. But then they're like, but I'm going to pull off 500. And one of the things that I think that a lot of people do is, like, on 0 to 10, they want to be at 10. They're at 1. But 2, 3, 4 are some of the hardest places for them to move through, because it's that's one of the things that I've noticed even with myself, like this paradigm shift. Whether it be in learning guitar or speaking a language, it's not just about money. It's about in all aspects. We sometimes have the biggest roadblocks in front of us, an inch in front of our nose. And so I love this idea of this, large long-term planning.
Yeah. It's, and I think you hit something there with that 1 to 10 scale. Of course we all want to excel and do amazing things. But I've found that in order to get to anywhere close to that, you have to engage in some kind of consistency daily. And I have also found, and through like a ton of reading and taking courses myself, is if you are relying on motivation and willpower to do your daily habits or tasks, you're going to fail, because your willpower bucket will eventually run empty. And so I think Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about this to some degree, but the tasks that you set for yourself should be so low that it requires zero motivation. It's like brushing your teeth. You're not motivated to brush your teeth. You just wake up and you do it because it's on autopilot at this point. And it takes 2 minutes and you're done. But the consistency over the years is, well, now your teeth are healthy and you don't have to have dentures, right? That's kind of the mindset we need to have. It's like, if you want to run an ultra marathon, but you've never run before, don't start by running 10 miles. Just walk around your block once. And if you can do that every day for a month, now you've got to the point where you enjoy exercise. You enjoy those 15 minutes that you're outside. And now it's like a thing that you're craving, as opposed to starting too heavy too early, and now you're dreading it because it hurts. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you can adjust it, set that bar really low, and just do it consistently, it's on autopilot. It's a habit now, and now again you're looking forward to it because you're making progress.
Yes. That was one of the things too, and I think this is where working with a coach or any type of trainer who can help people see that, or whether it be a piano teacher or a language coach or a personal trainer. I remember when I went back to the gym after having a long layoff, and at first the trainer was like, "All right, let's get the heavies out," and I was just like, I couldn't walk for a week afterwards. Literally couldn't go up and down the stairs. And I went back in and I was like, man, I can't train like that. That's not where I'm at. Like, can we meet my body where it's at? Like, because I can't be, I live in a place where we ride motorcycles around. If I can't stabilize myself when I'm on a motorcycle, that's not good,
Right, exactly, yeah.
Got to be where you're at. But I think that's also, and this is one of the beautiful things that I think that what you're doing too, is I think that one of the things that I think is really important and really interesting, and this is something I think that, people in martial arts, people in sports, people in the military have this, is a really beautiful mentorship program, because you are learning from those that came before, and I think that's really a good coach for sports, a good trainer, in a sensei in martial arts, is really important, because these are the people who set the tone, and they give you that experience. And one of the things too is they understand two things. They understand discipline, because you don't get to that level without having that discipline.
Right.
And they understand the power and importance of some of these different things that are needed to get there. One of my favorite books, hands down, is not even a large book. It's a small book, and it was based off of a graduation speech done by Admiral William McRaven. Have you read the book? I think the book's titled, like, when you wake up, get out of bed, make your bed. Yeah. Make your bed.
I haven't read it, but I'm familiar with it for sure. So
I love it. It. It's a quick read, man. You can finish it, and I think you can finish it in a day, 2 days, easy. Yeah. It's a really easy read and a really short, but not to be overlooked for the amount of profound insight in that. His anecdotes are really powerful, and like the simple fact is this guy, he's been there. And he's been there. Like, we're talking really been through it as well. Some of the injuries that he came back from when he had this insane, parachuting incident. Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that the most simple thing is starting off with making your bed. We really think that success, that life, to get there is going to be fancy in some way. And there was a podcast for a company that I'm hoping to do some work with, and I was cutting their podcast, and one of the points the guy made is like, everyone looks at like these people who are successful, these CEOs, or like Elon Musk now, and he looks like he's just this force of nature. But at one point in time, he was a guy who was fighting to get funding on his first project. At one point in time, he was a dude who was just spouting off crazy ideas about electric vehicles, and people looked at him like he was crazy. But he was crazy enough to try it. Right. But yet, people get there by the little things, like making your bed, but doing it consistently. And that's so interesting.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. And you brought up Elon Musk, and I think he's an interesting case, because not only has he been able to be consistent in order to achieve things, but he also had the capacity to dream as big as he did. And that's huge, because I think a lot of people don't dream big enough, and really, I tell folks a lot. People I work with, I tell them often that we overestimate what we can accomplish in a year, but drastically underestimate what we can accomplish in 5, and all of that is due to consistency. If you are consistent, you can dream super big and still achieve it, because of the compound interest of effort that accrues over 5 years. And now Push that out to 10 or 20 years. What could you really accomplish? If you maintain that level of consistency. I read a quote. It's like, if you were to improve 1% every day for a year, you are 37 times better than you were when you started. Now, again, push that out to 5 years and then 10 years. You're on another plane of existence at that point if you are just consistent. And it's 1% improvement, and that's hardly anything.
That's huge, man. And it's like, I love music, and I'm not a great musician, but I love music. And like, one of the things that's always held me back is my lack of understanding of theory and actually playing instruments. I always was a singer and growing up, and I sang in choirs and such, and I just relied on that. And yet I saw this one girl over the pandemic, and she was on the guitar site that I was playing instruments with, and in 1 year, in a year and a half, she went from pure beginner to phenomenal guitarist. And how did she pull it off? Every day she practiced for 2 hours. And it was that simple. 2 hours every day. Compounded over a year and a half. Every single day she stuck with it. And she got really freaking good.
Imagine that.
Right? Yeah. It just came down to practice and time spent. And consistency. But one of the things, coming back to Elon Musk, and I like, one thing that I like about Elon Musk, and there's this really good book that I was reading, and I believe this one is called Captain Class. And the book looks at leaders, and it's another phenomenal book. You got to check it out. And what it looked at is, for all of the top sports teams or championships teams, and the guy, they went into serious statistics on this stuff. Like, they looked at stuff in a really interesting way. What was it that set apart great teams throughout history? Right. What was it? Right. And what they found was that it all came down to a great leader. And that wasn't the captain of the team often. It was the person that was the heart and soul of that team. The person that was that wanted to win at no matter the cost, and people had to match up to that. Right. One of the things that he talks about in that is that these people great leaders are often disruptors. They come along and they shake things up, and they might be good, might be bad, but yet these disruptors are the ones who change the system the most. Exactly. And I think that one of the things that, Elon Musk, whether you like him or not, whether you like what he says and posts or not, he is a disruptor. He was a person who came along when we were entirely reliant on fossil fuels. And he wasn't the only person at Tesla, but he was one of the people who was most charismatic and really championed it and changed the system. Privatizing space flight. Like, what type of crazy, who sits there and go, yeah, you know what? I sit there and I was like, hey, I was talking to I'm going to talk to my little brother after this. He's an avid mountain biker, and I have great access to really, 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 really good quality bags here. Like, I can get custom bags made. I have a great factory up the street, and I want to make our own brand. I want to make our own bags. Yeah. That's still you could get a good business out of that, but that's not like, hey, let's figure out how to make a rocket.
It's not going to Mars.
Think about that. It's insane. The level of it. It's insane. Even the person that you can sit there and go, yeah, I can pull that off. Privatizing. Yeah, I could. It's like crazy thoughts, But that's what it takes at times to change things, to revolutionize an industry. You know what I mean? You have to be willing to. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, you're 100% correct, and I think Elon Musk's strength is instilling in other people that vision and getting them to work with him. I mean, who would have thought that? Yeah, they'd be building rockets and doing it at a fraction of the price that the U.S. government did. And then now they're planning to go to Mars. It's like he had to inspire a lot of people to believe in that dream. and
Yes.
now they're doing it. Now they're all working together, and it's pretty incredible. Yeah. So yeah, I
Right.
100% agree with you. He's a disruptor, and by his disruption, he inspires, I think, a lot of people.
I love that. Now let's imagine that someone walks in the door for a session with you. What does that intake look like? What does the first month look like? What does the first year look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. When people reach out to me and say, "Hey, I think I need help," our first interaction is really just getting to know each other to see if one, I would even be able to help them, because maybe my personality doesn't jive with them, or whatever, or maybe they're what they want to do doesn't really coincide with my own value system or whatever. But so like
That
we get
makes
that
sense.
kind of all out of the way, and we were like, you know what, I love your vibe. I think we'd be a great fit to work together. Let's do this. So that first session, and it usually takes the whole session, about an hour, hour and a half. It's like, all right, who do you want to become? But I'm pretty specific in how I approach it. I think as much as we claim we can compartmentalize ourselves, it's not true. If you lack discipline in one area, it tends to bleed over into other areas, and I preach that when I work with people. So the way I kind of combat that is I break you down into 5 categories essentially. So it would be mental, physical, emotional or spiritual, social, and financial. And my thought is, if we can establish firm identities and value system in each of those areas, we're leveling up your person as a whole, and not little boxes of you. It's you as a whole person are now aligned with your own value system. So that first session is, all right, mentally, who do you want to become? And I'll kind of give you an example of my own identities that I work through. Is so mentally, I am a constant learner. That is the identity that I have attached to myself and my person for 5 years down the road. I used to, and I still keep track of all the books I read, but I used to get really fixated on the number of books I read. I really wanted to hit like a book a week or whatever. And when I tweaked my mindset, whereas I'm a constant learner, the number of books I read mattered less, and the amount of retention and the amount of quality substance that I was picking up on was much more valuable. And so it gave myself a little bit of grace that I didn't have to like read through a book a week, but rather I had the opportunity and the capacity to then really digest material, whether that's a book or a podcast or YouTube or whatever. And so that has become my value system. I am a constant learner, and it has actually alleviated some stress that I was putting on myself, but it also has pushed me to continue to learn every day. So moving on to the physical. So the identity that I attach to that is I look good naked and I'm hard to kill. And so
hell yeah.
I say that, and it's something I'm still working on, but I say it that way because, one, it's kind of funny and it's easy to remember, but 2, it kind of makes sense. So if I look in the mirror and I am proud of what I see, that is a testament to my daily habits and training regimen up until that point. If I am not excited about what I see, then that is again a reflection of my daily habits up until now. Because fitness is one of those things you can't cram for. You can't shove it into 6 weeks and be physically fit. There's a lot of magazines out there that say, get abs by I don't know, by the end of the month or whatever.
Right.
And it's
right.
You just can't cram for fitness. It is a lifestyle, and so the look good naked part, that is really a testament to I am committed to daily practice of healthy living. The hard to kill part is some of that is just residue from my military days, where it's I don't know, that was part of the job, but now I've kind of translated it to, all right, if I'm physically fit, if I'm healthy, if I'm putting good fuel in my body to feed my machine, I am harder to kill. Disease has a harder time attacking me. If I keep my mind sharp, Alzheimer's will be staved off a little bit longer. Even there's been studies that increased muscle mass can protect you in car crashes. So so it's like the hard to kill part is practical in some sense too, because I'm being very intentional with what I do with my body. It's the only one I have, and I want to preserve its ability to function properly as long as I can. And so moving on, like my emotional identity is I am the calmest man in the room. That's what I strive to be, and that's primarily because I think when chaos arises or a situation, an unfortunate situation that could inspire panic shows up, I want to be the guy that's calm and can think through it and work through the problem, and not be reacting to the chaos, but rather acting upon it. So, and then
I'm writing that down. That is like literally the coolest thing I've heard in a while. Calmest man in the room.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
That is something to aspire to, man. That is awesome.
But so thinking forward though, but that's hard to like quantify. Like, how do I make that into a 5-year goal?
Right.
It's hard. And so what I've found is, all right, I can't quantify calm, but I can quantify number of meditation practices that I engaged in over a year.
Right.
And so if I am consistent with meditation, like on a daily basis, then I can quantify that. I can measure that. I can count the number of times that I was deliberate with meditating. And I'm a firm believer that meditation will lead to calmness, and will lead to that ability to, when stuff happens, you have that moment where you can take a breath and think, and then act appropriately. So those are a couple of examples of kind of that identity piece that I was referring to. And that's kind of what our first session looks like when we sit down and talk. It's like, all right, who do you want to become? What is the value system that now you're building your life around? And that's where we go from there. That's
really awesome. I'm coming back to that calmest man in the room. That's an awesome process, though, by the way.
I appreciate it.
I think that, no, for sure, man. That's awesome. And hopefully anybody who would like a session can look you up, and hopefully we can spread more of the message of what you're trying to do here as well.
That'd be great.
But coming back to the calmest man in the room, it's like, I think that there was this one guy at my high school, or my college, Paul Kwan. Paul was the nicest, most relaxed, chill guy that you could ever meet. He walked around campus very inconspicuously. He just was a normal guy. And Paul never popped out. Hey guys, how you doing? It's nice to see you. And just very soft, very, very, not soft, but just very, seemed quiet, and people kind of, they overlooked him. Paul was always overlooked. One day at my martial arts gym, some people came and asked my teacher if they could train there. It was on a college campus, and they're like, "Can we use your mats before your class? We'll rent them from you or whatever." And my teacher's like, "Sure, just come on in and have some fun. We're all, if you're training, though, just be sure to if you wouldn't mind sharing some of your techniques and some of your knowledge with my students, that'd be awesome."
Yeah.
So
cool.
Suddenly there's Paul standing there. I was like, what the hell's Paul doing here, man? What's this guy doing? And he's wearing his Hapkido uniform. And the man was badass. When I went to find out, he was like Hapkido national champion. His father was like a 10th degree black belt and like the system founder of this one branch of Hapkido. And like,
Wow.
and like Paul was so badass. Like he would win, Hapkido is like the combat form of Taekwondo. And
Cool.
like,
That's awesome.
it was like jujitsu versus judo, and and he would go and do Taekwondo competitions. But he would never be able to win by points because he wasn't that good. He just would knock people out, and he was just like, and there's one time he was doing it, and then he broke the guy's arm, and like, and I went up against Paul, like, and I was like, he's like, hey, you want to spar? And I was like, sure, I'd love to, and I thought I was pretty good. I'm not a striker, but I took Muay Thai classes, took boxing classes, I took Taekwondo classes, and I was like, I can hold my own.
Sure.
Yeah, no, Paul kicked me 3 times in the head before I even got my hands up. Like, it was the craziest thing. Like, and he tapped me, like, lightly, like, pop, pop, pop. And it was like, I was just like, dude, I just got kicked. He was the quietest guy in the room. He had the ability to whoop up and just absolutely destroyed probably 99% of the people on my campus. There was probably 1 or 2 other sleepers that you didn't know, And I remember seeing a fight on campus once, and Paul just stepped into the middle and shut it down. Like, he didn't hurt anyone. He just shut it down. And it was just amazing to see that level of power. But he was the quietest guy in the room. And what is that? Teddy Roosevelt's thing. Walk quietly and carry a big stick.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's like that, having that level of, but you have to have this deep sense of self-knowledge, and people in Taoism, the ancient philosophy of China, there's this one great saying. I love Taoism, and like, the wise man doesn't talk, the fool talks a lot,
right?
And so essentially, like, the person who's truly wise, they keep their mouth shut. Why? Because they understand they don't know anything.
Exactly.
They understand. They don't have it all together.
Right.
And I think that the wisdom to being the quietest guy in the room is really powerful. Now, where did you learn that from? Where did you pick that up? Was that something you came up with?
No, I definitely didn't come up with it. I'm sure I saw it on the internet somewhere. It was either a meme or something, and it just resonated with me because it made a lot of sense. And I think, man, I'm trying to remember. I think it was going back to the internet meme or whatever it was referring to in moments of chaos, look to the calmest man in the room because he's about to do something, and I think that's what resonated with me. And referring to your story to Paul, he had the ability to be calm because he had an incredible depth of self-awareness and trust in himself and his capabilities. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the level I want to strive for as well, is like complete trust in self and knowing what I am and am not capable of. And yeah, when chaos shows up, I want to be that guy that can act appropriately to it.
I told my daughter that there was a video that popped up on the internet the other day, and there was this guy. The house was on fire, and everyone's screaming, "No, no! What is happening?" And the guy suddenly looks up, looks around, and runs in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And he walks out a minute later carrying his dog. And we're talking, this house is engulfed in flames.
Right.
And he just goes in, comes out with his dog. And he's burned, on his shoulders and stuff. He uncovers himself and the dog, and they start treating him. But he's still calm. He never once is freaked out. And and everyone else is just screaming. They're like, ah! And he saw, he knew, and he acted.
Yeah.
He saw, he knew, and he acted.
Yep.
And my daughter was talking to my daughter, and and she's like, "Daddy, what type of man should I marry?" And I said, "The man who's willing to walk into the fire."
Yeah, that's a good answer. Yeah.
The man who's willing to walk into the fire. Doesn't matter what he does for work, what he looks like. You find the man who's willing to walk into the fire.
Yeah.
For his family, for his friends, for his country, for whatever.
Sure.
Find the man that's willing to walk into the fire.
Yeah.
And I think that's the advice I give my daughter.
That's a
And I want to be that man, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I'm the same way. I think in our situation, we get to be that first model of for our daughters of who they should be looking for. So yeah, I want to be that guy too.
I want to have an armory as well. So when that first boyfriend comes over, he will be intimidated beyond all measure.
Agreed.
Let's talk about my weapon room.
Yeah, hey, step in here real quick. Yeah.
Right? That's awesome, man. Well, I want to ask you one last question here before we finish up. If you could go back in time and give your younger self some advice, what would that advice be?
Yeah. This is my standard answer to that question, and it's 3 parts. All right. If I could go back and talk to my 18-year-old self, and if he was smart enough to listen,
right?
Yeah, I would say, all right, step 1, get in the best shape of your life. Your health is kind of the foundation from which you can function. It affects everything. Get as healthy as you can and make that a lifestyle. And there's that would be the first piece of advice. The second is learn to control your emotions. Feel all of your emotions, but don't let them dictate how you function day to day.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I think so. Stoicism is kind of resurging lately, and I think it's great. But I think
huge Ryan Holiday fan.
The same, yeah. I think a lot of people mistake Stoicism for lack of emotion. It's not accurate. It's rather you feel all of your emotions, but you set them aside when it's time to make big decisions in your life, and you think through it rationally and logically, because that will create the best outcome. So that's what I would say. That'd be the second piece of advice. All right, learn to control your emotions. Learn to feel all of your emotions, but learn to control them. And then lastly is learn to be intentional with your money. You can't be reactive to your paycheck. It has to be another tool in your tool belt that you know how to wield properly. If I could have lived by those 3 rules when I was 18, I'd be in a different place for sure. So.